let's hop into the news here. So the first bit of news, Starbreeze Games, they're basically a publishing studio that publishes a bunch of games you've probably heard of. Payday 2, they did Brothers, which is that indie game that a lot of people loved where you controlled each brother with an individual joystick. They're doing a ton of stuff. One of the biggest games that they're known for publishing that hasn't actually come out yet is Overkill's The Walking Dead. It's a licensed Walking Dead game, licensed by Skybound. It's based on the comic, not on the television show, which is kind of an important thing here. Unfortunately, they announced that it's delayed till next year. This was a game that was originally shown off in 2014, and then we didn't hear about it for a while. Then we had the teaser in 2015, and then we had nothing in 2016. Now in 2017, they had the stream. They told us it's delayed till next year. They really just showed off some concept art and some player models. My personal opinion is, though I really want to play this game, it's a first-person game based on The Walking Dead. I don't really know if this game's ever coming out. It just seems like for you to delay this game, for it to be revealed so long ago and still not have anything for it and say it's going to be releasing next year is kind of worrisome. But, you know, we don't know what scale this game's at. Maybe they are saving the actual gameplay and stuff for E3. Maybe they have a deal in place where they can't show any gameplay before then, you know. So they wanted to say the game's still being worked on, show some concept stuff, and maybe Sony stage or Microsoft stage will actually see gameplay for the first time. But I think it's a disappointing announcement. From you guys, do you think this is from a standpoint of this game just is having development trouble, or do you think is them saying, like, we can hit this fall, but look at everything that's releasing. Do we really want to hit this fall? Where do you think this delay comes from?
So I have a question first, is because I'm not like intimately familiar with this. I've heard about it on and off over the years, but like you said, there's not a lot out there. Is it primarily single player or multiplayer?
Primarily multiplayer. In the presentation for Overkill, they mentioned multiplayer was the second word that came out of their mouth. Survival multiplayer Walking Dead game. Like, it was right out the gate. Like, so it is multiplayer focused.
Was it always like that in 2014 though, or is this more of a recent thing they've been hitting up? And the reason I asked, well, go ahead.
They've never really given any context. Like, we're making a Walking Dead game. They gave us that weird cinematic. I don't know if you guys remember. It was a camera in-game engine panned at a wall, and you saw shadows and like sun coming through the window, and then you heard like banging on a door, and then a woman being attacked by a zombie. That's all we've really gotten. Like, they haven't really discussed the plot, what timeline it's at in The Walking Dead. All we know is it's based in the comic universe, and now they're saying it's multiplayer focused.
So it would seem that it's kind of a Walking Dead first-person DayZ.
I guess, yeah. I was thinking more of like a multiplayer. What's the zombie game that came out 2 years ago that everybody loved? Came out in the spring.
That's DayZ.
No, not DayZ. That's not DayZ. Is a PC game. I'm talking about Dying Light. It seems like a multiplayer Dying Light. Yeah.
Well, the reason I asked if it was multiplayer or not, and the fact that they are now, like you said, hitting up the multiplayer aspect of the game, I wouldn't be surprised if Starbreeze is having them. If Starbreeze has had this game reworked over the past couple of years.
True. Yeah.
Because, and the reason I say that is, I don't know if you guys saw this a few weeks ago. It was kind of a hidden story, and the only reason I'm even familiar with it is because I actually had to write the story up about it. But Starbreeze said a few weeks ago that they're almost totally shifting away from single-player games. Like, if their in-house developed games are almost always going to be multiplayer focused, and they're not developing this game in-house, are they?
I don't know if Overkill is a studio that they own. They're publishing it. I don't know. Yeah, I
can't remember that, but I know that they said that their studios that they own, they want them to all be working on multiplayer projects rather than single player projects. And people ask them questions like, "Well, what about Brothers or something like that? Like, that did well critically?" And they're like, "Yeah, well, we've had these games that do well critically, but they don't do anything for us financially. You know, it has done well financially for us. Payday 2.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is the gift that keeps on giving." And so I'm wondering if initially with this game, it started out more single-player focused, and as time has moved on, I wonder if they've kind of reworked things to where they've been like, no, we need to make this game multiplayer focused so that it has a long lifespan and so that we can get as much money from it as we can, because they've outright said that, I mean, even in this story, I think it was on gamesindustry.biz that they're not going to be doing single player games any longer with their development studios. The only way in which they would put out single player products would be if they are publishing them exclusively, and other developers come to them with the idea.
Well,
they're open to it in that case, but otherwise they're going to stick with multiplayer because that's where they make their money.
Well, you look at their biggest games, Payday 2, right? Another game that gets hidden away. Dead by Daylight has had phenomenal sales numbers on PC. It's asymmetric multiplayer game where one person's a murderer and the 4 people try to survive. This makes sense. Another thing in the stream, and this actually points to what you just said about that news story, is during the presentation for this game, when they were saying it was delayed, they said that this game is going to be supported for years to come, and they're going to supply players with free DLC for the foreseeable future post-release. So that makes sense for them to have the model of, it's a multiplayer game, it comes out, and then they just trickle out these updates to keep it as a living, breathing environment, right? They've seen how good Payday 2's done and how many legs that... it's impressive that Payday 2 still has an active fan base when nobody in any of our circles ever talks about playing Payday 2.
It's coming out on Switch this summer.
So Overkill is a studio that is owned by Starbreeze. So that makes total sense, actually.
Yeah.
If they are shifting it to be more multiplayer focused.
Yeah. And by the way,
detective work.
The player models that they showed off looked beautiful. They said they were in engine, but obviously they weren't in environment. They were close up on the thing, so you don't know how they're gonna look when they're actually running, right? With everything else happening. But as far as the zoom in on the characters, looks really nice. So maybe they did take a turn and they started focusing multiplayer, and maybe it also gave them time to, because maybe there was a multiplayer facet of this game, but maybe they just had to ditch the single player stuff and go fully into that. And maybe the polish is there, and that's great. It's going to be interesting when this game releases. They didn't say spring, summer, fall. They just said 2018. This is a game that a lot of people I know that aren't even into the video game industry or deep into who Overkill is, they see Walking Dead. They want to play a Walking Dead game. The last one that came out with Daryl was abysmal. That game was handled horribly, didn't come out too well. We are missing a solid Walking Dead game. Luckily for people who at least own an Xbox, hopefully they're going to get that to some capacity in State of Decay 2 later this year. But I really think that this is a game that will probably sell pretty well, so hopefully it comes out sooner rather than later.
So I have one question for you guys real quick before we shift away from this. If this is multiplayer focused, then how do you in turn feel about it? Because I feel like the multiplayer zombie landscape is kind of getting a bit out of control. There's a lot of competition in the market. And the other thing I'll say too about that is that The Walking Dead to me has never been just a paint by the numbers zombie world. It's more about the characters and the stories that happen within that world. Right. So to just instead end up making a generic zombie multiplayer shooter with the Walking Dead brand attached to it, that's really uninteresting to me.
I agree. So they put out someone different. First it was DayZ, which was PC only, like you said, Jared, and then someone modded that into War Z or something. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that didn't do too well. And then and I remember hearing about something called H1Z1, which was the same kind of thing, but I think it was PS4 exclusive. Maybe, I'm not sure.
No, it's on PC.
I remember hearing
that
about
it. That was PC as well.
That was PC too.
It was meant to come to console. It still hasn't.
Okay.
Yeah, the thing that this has over all those other games is all those other games haven't come to console. The only one that has is 7 Days to Die, and that game's seen pretty good success.
We had the Left 4 Deads back in the day, but those were Xbox only, Xbox and PC, and those games still have a pretty good lifespan, I think, on PC. There's still a fan base for those games, but it has kind of come and gone, I think.
The difference too is in the stream when they showed a black male protagonist and they showed a redheaded-ish kind of female, and they had specific names. So I wonder if this is a multiplayer experience in Payday 2 where it's 4 people going out into a world, right? It's not massively multiplayer or anything like that. And it is character driven because they are working really intimately with Skybound. Skybound was in the presentation. They were having an interview back and forth with people at Skybound. So I don't think this is here, license it out. And another thing is the character models themselves were high quality. This isn't no offense to H1Z1 or any of those games, but the gameplay isn't that great, but yeah, they don't look very good, right? And I think this is being nurtured a little bit more, and I think there is enough of a niche audience here that it is going to fill a gap. Like I said, a lot of those games haven't come to console. I have friends who want to play H1Z1 or want to play PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, which is kind of in the same vein as H1Z1 with survival, right? Obviously not zombies. But those games are taking a long time to come to console if they ever do. And I think this can hit that gap. It's going to be interesting to see how successful it is. It's going to be interesting the price point. Is this a $60 retail game? Is this a $40 digital only? Does this even release retail? It's going to be interesting to see what they do with it. Though some people might disagree with Starbreeze saying like, hey, we're only going to do multiplayer games, you have to look at it from a business perspective and be like, well, there's a reason most people don't know about Starbreeze. They do have successful stuff, but it's not like the AAA masterpieces. And releasing a AA, 2.5A game that does critically well, but it's not going to see those sales numbers, right? They need to make money off of microtransactions and word of mouth and the Twitch streamers playing multiplayer. So it makes sense to me. It's unfortunate because I have friends who've been wanting to play this game for 3 years now and keep asking me, when's it coming out? When's it coming out? And I'm like, I don't know, dude. I can't tell you.
Ask Jason Schreier. He's the one that fucking delays games.
Speaking of games that probably won't sell well, this story comes by way of Polygon, Allegra Frank. Thief movie producers say a new Thief game is in the works. A fifth game is said to be tied to the upcoming film. This is interesting. The Thief franchise was one that was owned and made by Eidos Montreal. They got purchased, obviously, by Square Enix, and now Square Enix owns it. They're making a Thief movie, which is surprising in and of its own right. But then they're making a fifth game. We're living in a world where Eidos Montreal can no longer work on Deus Ex, but there's a new Thief game in development. I just think this is really strange. It says, people consider Thief to be, like, in the article it states that people consider it to be one of the greatest games ever created, the first Thief. I've never played it. I don't really know many people who have. Even people in the industry that I listen to, I think Ryan McCaffrey is probably the only person I've ever heard talk lovingly about Thief. It's just strange to me. The last Thief game came out on PC and console in 2014. So it's an odd story. I don't know if there's anything much for us to say. I just thought it was an interesting, weird story.
Well, that's the oddest part is that they just fucking rebooted Thief. Why are they rebooting it again 3 years later?
Because it was a bad reboot. It's like the Spider-Man movies at this point. The Amazing Spider-Man reboot was a bad reboot, so we're wiping that away.
Well, just press the button again. We'll see what happens.
Ugh. It's funny that this is probably going to go the opposite of Ratchet and Clank, where, well, maybe not even as good as that. Because, like, Ratchet and Clank came out. The movie reviewed phenomenally. Jordan loved the movie. A lot of people felt otherwise.
The movie did not review phenomenally.
Yeah, no, I said the game. No, I said the game. I said Jordan thought the movie was great. Many other people.
I think you did say the movie. What you meant was the game reviewed well. Yeah. The movie did not.
Yes, and that's for Ratchet and Clank, which I think even has more legs, way more legs than Thief.
Oh yeah.
I think the movie's going to come out for Thief. Probably not going to be good. The game's going to come out. Probably won't be good. Like, who's working on this game is my biggest question. It's not Eidos Montreal. They're working on the Marvel game. It's weird. Are they going to give this to like a second studio? They're not giving it to IO Interactive, which we'll get into later. But like, it's really weird. If you were to gather 100 people that were into video games and sit them in a room and say, what franchise do you want to see come out this year? I doubt any of them would. I would put $1 million on the fact that none of them would say Thief. It's so weird, man. It's so weird how these decisions get made. Like, I don't understand how Thief is a more justifiable option to sink money into than all the other franchises they could be making. It's just super weird. We don't have to get into it. I just figured it was an interesting story. The last bit of news here is interesting. New Assassin's Creed game screenshot and name reportedly leak. For a while, we got the rumors that it was going to be called Assassin's Creed Empire. It was going to be taking place in Egypt. They took a year off hiatus, Ubisoft did, from the Assassin's Creed franchise, so they had a little bit more time to work on this. Now we got a weird screenshot. It shows an assassin-like character in a boat in what looks to be Egypt, and it shows like a mission where it says like kill the crocodile. It obviously looks, this is pretty legitimate. This is the next Assassin's Creed game. Anybody with eyes can see that this is, for the most part, 90% a legitimate screenshot. I think the most interesting details lie within some of the other leaks that happened, and this is from the story by Chris Pereira over on GameSpot. And he says, new details have emerged regarding the next entry in the Assassin's Creed series, which will reportedly be called Assassin's Creed Origins. That name was first reported by WWG and has since been corroborated by Eurogamer. Now they go into the details. Let's see here. Let me find it for you guys. Okay. It pictures a boat-wielding character on a boat, albeit one much smaller than what players controlled in Assassin's Creed Black Flag, which you guys remember we controlled these massive pirate ships, arguably the best pirate game ever created. Since the release of Assassin's Creed Unity, we've learned a lot based on your feedback. It stated at the time, this is Ubisoft. We've also updated our development process and recommended making Assassin's Creed a premier open-world franchise. Apparently, I guess in this article he doesn't get into it. I can just go over what I read. Origins is a game that's going to be taking place in multiple timelines from rumors and multiple locations. It seems to be the earliest game in the franchise, taking place even before Assassin's Creed 1. And it's interesting. It seems like they're going more RPG heavy. They stated that the narrative isn't going to be driven solely by player missions, that it's going to be more of an open worldy, build the story yourself kind of feeling, which is interesting. I think it's an interesting direction for Assassin's Creed. Jordan, I know you're a huge Assassin's Creed fan. I want to hear what you guys have to say about the title, the direction, what you guys are expecting. Is this weird?
So I think, first of all, what I want to say is that I just feel like a lot of people might have this misconception in their mind that because they took a year off that this is going to be a huge leap, or that it's going to fix all their issues that they had, or that
a leap of
faith. that this is going to fix, some of those clunky issues where you're jumping off of walls you don't want to or whatever. I think it's really kind of just going to be pretty similar. I mean, they took 1 year off. It's not like they took 3, and so I don't think you're going to see a quantum leap of faith, as it were. But I do think that they're at least, pushing in new directions. It is exciting to see it go further back in time because, up until this point, as far as the mainline games go, they were continuing throughout history. And so I was almost kind of worried that they were, locking themselves out of going back. But obviously now that doesn't seem to be the case. And I'm really happy about that because it gives us more of a timeline to explore, obviously. As far as the look of it and, where it is or whatever, I can't tell you much. I think it'd be cool if part of it was in Egypt, as I've said before. But yeah, I just think that it's just not going to be so much different that it really, blows people away. But I am still excited, and I think that, for me, I was buying Assassin's Creed games every year simply because of the fact that they were doing what I wanted them to for the $60 price point, and I had really no issues except for, of course, Unity when it came out super duper buggy. But I ended up having more glitches in Syndicate in the long run, so I think that, I think we've seen plenty of games since Unity came out that were just as buggy as Unity. And so, people obviously give Ubisoft and the Assassin's Creed franchise and Unity a lot of crap for that. But, where we are now in May 2017, it's kind of commonplace. And so, they haven't hurt my feelings, I guess. I'm still on board.
I think it's cool. I like the Egypt thing. What other games have been in Egypt, right? I mean, I guess the Mario level in the sand, right?
Well, I think our friend Logan played a few hours in Agrabah going through Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2.
Oh, good point. I don't think that's...
It's not one-to-one Egypt. Close enough.
But no, I like the setting. I think that's cool. But I think, Jordan, you're onto something. I don't think the gameplay is going to be drastically different. I think, they're just going to change the way they structure the story. More open. A little more like what we saw in Breath of the Wild, maybe, where it's more emphasis on exploring. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be a huge change. I think it's mostly just going to be more polished than what we saw with Unity and stuff. So that's my expectation. So.
Yeah, I think the year off was more of like a mental break for fans, myself included.
Yeah.
Because I'm finding myself like excited and actually looking forward to this year. And I agree. Like is it going to be a drastic departure from other games in the series? I'm sure it'll have its differences that set it apart because like I feel like they do need to change certain elements of it, but at the
Right.
same core of what the game is, it is going to be very similar, I think. But again, having that year off and having 2 years between games, it does make me excited for this one later this year. And I like just that screenshot alone, like made me legitimately hyped for this game.
Nice.
And the thing I'll say about the boat stuff too is like I'm glad they're bringing that back in some way, because that was the best part of Assassin's Creed 4. Assassin's Creed 4 is probably my favorite in the series. So I have no idea how in depth the boat things will be in what is supposedly Origins, but I'm glad there's something like it.
That thing, I don't think this screenshot tells us. Everyone's saying, "Oh, well, I guess boats are back." Like he's,
Yeah, it just looks like something.
Yeah,
it just looks like something. It's cool that you can go on the Nile though.
Right,
Like that in any way.
There's other Assassin's Creed games where you're in rowboats and it has, there's no boat gameplay. So I don't know that this confirms it, but either way, personally, I really did not like any of the boating situations in either 3 or 4. And I was really glad in Unity and Syndicate when I didn't have to fuck with that shit, because I just think, spin that game off and make a Pirates game or whatever, or make a seafaring adventure. But for an Assassin's Creed game, it just took too much out of the experience and the situation to where the focus wasn't properly on the stealth and the assassinating. And so personally, I would be totally fine and would actually prefer if this were if you just didn't have any of the big ship stuff.
I guess I'll play devil's advocate to all of you guys. I think all of you guys are... I'm looking forward to this game. I don't want to play it. My big worry is that they said that your player progression isn't going to be tied as closely to narrative as it was in the past. I am fearful that this is going to be built on a Division or Ghost Recon Wildlands template, which those games, huh?
I'm sorry. They said that it won't be as story based.
No, that your player progression will not be as closely tied to your narrative as it was in the past. Whereas in the past you would unlock abilities specifically when you hit certain points in the story and stuff like that. They said that's not the case. My biggest worry is that this is based off of a template of Ghost Recon Wildlands or Division, which I like those games a lot. That's not what I want in an Assassin's Creed game. And my biggest worry is that they do that. Ubisoft has stated recently in the last couple of months, kind of like Starbreeze, that they want to focus more on multiplayer experiences in these worlds people live in and not so much on narrative-driven stuff. And my worry is that Assassin's Creed just simply becomes a Division of Wildlands with an Assassin's Creed skin on it and you can assassinate and stuff like that. That's my biggest issue. I mean, the time frame kind of thing doesn't line up with that. I'm thinking maybe this is like what you're saying, where it's not a huge departure, and maybe depending on the success of this one dictates whether or not they go the Division Wildlands route. But I'm waiting to see more from this game before I get super excited. But man, a year without Assassin's Creed, I think a lot of us are excited. So hopefully it's good. It's going to be interesting to see what stage it shows up on first too. And did Microsoft get this bad boy? Did Sony? We'll see.
Yeah.